Hello and welcome to the Boro Breakdown podcast, the Marcus Forss edition with Jonny and Dana. And in this video, we're going to chat about Middlesbrough's new centre forward and what he can bring to the Boro side. Dana, thank you very much for joining me as always. And I want to know how you're feeling about the new striker in 3 words.
I'm going to say leaning towards optimistic because I think in terms of a player profile and what he can bring, he definitely fits into the team. And he's a poacher. He's a poacher, and that's what we have needed. It's what we haven't had since probably Bamford, maybe even Britt when he came, although that kind of went down the pan a little bit, didn't it? So yeah, Force on paper is a good signing. Whether or not he will be the first choice, obviously we'll get to that. You got a question about that, but I'm not so sure. But it will be a good signing. I think I do believe that this could be a really good signing for Middlesbrough.
I'm going to go with finally a striker. Just the desperate need for strikers before. Obviously, we're recording this before the West Brom game, but also we're just in need of bringing some new bodies in to help us up front. Appreciate there is links of Duncan Watmore potentially leaving, Chuba Akpom potentially leaving. Josh Coburn needs time away to develop. So to have one new striker in, £3 million, who we think is going to be a good sign, and we're going to break that down why in a second. But to have that new body in, it just brings a little bit of excitement. And finally, we can talk about someone at the top end of the pitch rather than someone who's a defender, a goalkeeper, and a left wing back. But let's try about the deal and go in more depth of the striker, because we've paid £3 million for the Finnish forward from Brentford, and it's starting. It is really the start of the build of the strike force, because we do probably need a couple more to really stake a claim and try and get ourselves up the league this season. But what does Force bring to the team, Dana?
I think penalty box instinct, which is, as I said, something that we haven't had, and a lot of people will look immediately at his goal record. But 10 goals in 1,747 minutes in 2021, a goal every 175 minutes. To compare that to Duncan Watmore, he was averaging a goal every 304 minutes last season and 207 in 2021. Only 2 of the 28 goals that he scored in his career so far, which is a relatively young career. I mean, he's 23, isn't he? He's never really been an established first team striker at Brentford. Only 2 of those 28 goals have been outside of the box. So you're going to get somebody who, in the 18-yard box, in the 6-yard box, is going to come alive. And I think with any striker that we bring in this season, this summer, really excited about them because of Giles and Jones. If we didn't have Giles and Jones, it would be a completely different story. But with them two, with supplying the service and the creativity, I can be really confident and lean towards that optimism, as I said at the top, that the strikers that we bring in will be good. And I mean, I go back to that 2021 campaign for Marcus Forss, and the only reason I'm doing that is because last season it was a difficult loan spell for him at Hull. He was playing up front on his own, and a lot of their fans say he struggled. To be honest, they deserved for him to struggle because they were playing him in a completely different system that, it just doesn't suit his strengths. But an XG per 90 of 0.44, goals per 90 0.51, that tells me that he was getting chances and he was scoring them, because there's a slight overperformance there in terms of shooting. But that's good. You'd rather that than underperformance that we saw with particularly Andres Spirra last season. So I'm really excited. I think if you give him that service, which we will, the different types of crosses with Giles and Jones, the low crosses, any cross Giles can deliver into the box, can't he? It's mouthwatering. It's really promising that we have that foundation there, and now that we've got Marcus Forss to be that poacher, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, I am too. I think you're absolutely spot on when you talk about Giles and Isaiah Jones really feeding in to a centre forward like that. And I think the one thing that Boro have missed really over the last few seasons, well, you could say with Britt at times, he needed the service. He probably needed the Giles and Isaiah Jones of the
Yeah.
world to get the chances. But you need someone who can be in the right place at the right time in the penalty box. And I think we're going to have that with Forss, to be honest. I think, his record, yes, it hasn't been sensational, but there is probably there's a lot of potential within it. You know, they output the overperforming of the XG, which is really promising. I think you said there was one goal in 170 minutes. Was that? I think was that right? What you were saying?
One goal every 175 minutes.
So that's probably what, just shy of 1 and 2, if you
Mhm.
want to talk about that. So it's a good record to have, and I think, you know, if we do give him the right service, we should be in for a good season with him, to be honest. Like, and I appreciate Middlesbrough fans will always want someone who is going to be, oh, where's this goal scorer that we're after? We need to be in the market for goal scorers.
We need Bernie
But
Slaven back.
we need Bernie Slave, and he can still do a job. And to be honest, like a person that whose most touches and biggest strengths are in that penalty box, if he does get the service, he'll probably deliver on that. And you know, obviously, you're looking at the graph there, if you're watching us on YouTube. But if you're not and listening to us, we've got a penalty box up, and it shows that his goals um, for Marcus Forss in the 2021 season were all in the penalty box. And what I do like is a few of them are on the right hand side. It shows that a
Mm.
striker is going to be at the back post, and a good striker is always at the back post because he's anticipating the ball or the gamble or someone just to get there or towards him. I'm not going to lie, there was a shot on target in there where he's about 2 yards out, and it looks like somehow the keeper saved it. But overall, his positional within that is really, really strong, and I think that's a real key for him, and for us as well. We just have to get the service right, and hopefully we can do that. But in terms of like stuff that he can work on, we've seen a couple of the graphs and around his pass up and passing his link up play. I think that's probably the biggest part of his game, which I think he does need to improve on. Now, for a striker who's probably playing as a two, I think the link up play is probably a little bit more essential because you're wanting to try and either come in one go for the run, and you can try and feed the striker coming through, or you're trying to work together and try and get the ball out wide so you can get in those areas and hopefully try and get the strike away. But saying that, from what we're seeing in his data, he's definitely a poacher. You know, he's going to be in and around the box. We're hoping to get a bit more service to him, and if he gets the opportunity, he tends to take it. So all of that is really, really positive. But with £3 million then for a striker is relatively quite low, given in comparison that we've paid for strikers in the past. Can you see him being the first choice, and how will we get the best of him? Best out of him. I know we're saying it's a lot about Jones, but is it going to be consistency, or is it going to be Chris Wilder giving him like an arm on the shoulder or anything like that? But do you think he's going to be a first choice striker for Middlesbrough this season?
I'm not so sure in the long term because I think probably now, or at least post West Brom, because obviously he came in on yesterday, Wednesday. It's sorry, Thursday. It's difficult to get into the rhythm and the swing of things when you've just signed, and then there's probably one training session and then the game on Saturday. So Chris Wilder said he'd be involved in the 18 on Saturday, but I don't think he'll be first choice straight away. He struck me when we signed him as an impact substitute because in that 2021 campaign, he did play the most minutes off the bench in the entirety of the championship. He was that impact sub for Brentford, and he did well with that. Obviously, the 10 goals that he scored, and he scored that really crucial goal for them against Bournemouth, which sent them to Wembley in their eventual promotion campaign. I think in the long term he has potential to be, but there's a lot that he does need to work on. You mentioned it, probably the build-up play. A lot of what I've read and heard from Brentford fans is them saying that he's not somebody that's going to be involved in the build-up. He's going to be on the end of that build-up. So he's not really going to be involved in the kind of dropping deep, receiving the ball, passing. He has bulked up from what I've seen, from what I've read as well, which is good. I think there's definite improvements to be made and improvements that have been made in his build-up play. I would like to see him become first choice because then that means that he's improved and that he's become a much better player than he is already. But right now, I kind of can't see it. Although, I mean, the situation is that Boro only have him, Coburn, and Watmore, so it's difficult. But if I put the graph up on the screen now, you can see that again we're going back to that 2021 campaign. The goal conversion is absolutely fantastic. There you see in the bottom quadrant, bottom right
99%
quadrant.
percentile, right? Is that yeah? He's in the top 1% of strikers. Is that right? from what I can see.
22.859 goal conversion, which is really good. I think the average of strikers is incredibly low. So the fact that he's obviously getting those numbers is brilliant. The non-penalty goals as well, non-penalty XG per
Sorry,
90,
that's what I was looking at.
0.44. Yeah, the goal
Sorry.
conversion is two above that, but still very close there in the goal conversion. A very clinical striker, as you can see there. Shout out to our friends Blues Breakdown for that. You can see in that role profile as well, not a creator, not a target man, but a poacher, and that is exactly what Boro have needed. I feel like I say that a lot. That's exactly what Boro need, but we have needed a poacher. And then if we move on to again, our good friends at Foreseeable on Twitter, I was tempted when I asked them if we could use this graph to say it was foreseeable that I was going to message you. You get that little force, pun in there. But yeah, look at that attacking. You've got the XG, the conversion rate again, non-penalty goals, successful attacking actions. He's just a very good penalty box striker, and I think he's definitely worth Boro fans getting excited about. Not too excited, obviously, because there's still raw parts of his game, but percentile rank in those attacking metrics are very good. And at the end of the day, Boro have needed a clinical finisher. We haven't had one in so long, and we've got one now in Marcus Forss. One Marcus in, one Marcus out.
If you just don't mind pulling that graph back up, on that one, and it's just around like that. Obviously, the defensive style stats and the possession stats. So obviously, one thing that, and you're looking at header goals and probably offensive duels as well. So the one big no-no for if you're Chris Wilder is do not play a long ball to Marcus Forss, and that is probably as simple as it gets. I think it definitely has to be a fee. This is the same from when we used to speak about Britt and Ashley Fletcher at times, where we used to speak about crosses in the box, and under Neil Warnock, we would get balls in the box, but it was always up in the air, over the heads, and you can have as many crosses as you want, but if you're not hitting your striker, there's absolutely no point. So for Boro to get probably the best out of him, I think the low cross in the box make the defense gamble, and I think he will probably gamble as well to try and get on the end of them as well. So for me, real bonus. I think it's a good signing for us, and I think with £3 million for a 23-year-old going to probably 27 by the end of his contract, we're going to add value to him, hopefully, which Chris Wilder was speaking quite a lot of when we were at the event on Monday night about putting value on the players, and I feel like that's definitely a sign for us where we can maybe look at in a couple of seasons, regardless of where we are, and we can go, right, we could probably sell him on for another fee and be a profitable and sustainable business, because I know fans are getting frustrated at the moment with obviously Marcus having a year leave and probably so close towards the season. I can see that, Jed Spence leaving for a big fee, which I know is not probably a huge loss, but again, putting value on players, I think we'll probably see more of it in the next few years, where we probably will see some of our better players go for bigger fees, and we just recycle that cash, and then we just do that same system all over again. And that's where I think Boro will be, and I think that's where Boro are heading with this move as well.
Yeah, and on that, you mentioned the Q&A on Monday. He was asked by a fan in attendance about, permanent signings. We've had a few loans. We had obviously Sparrow, Balogun, Connolly on loan last season. Are we going to bring in permanent deals? And we have clinched a permanent deal there for Marcus Forss. So exactly what you said there, feeding into the narrative of building value onto players. We're building value onto our players, not another team's players. We're not, building or moulding another team's player into a better player. It's now with Forss, our player that we're hopefully going to develop into a much better and much more valuable asset. So yeah, really good deal, I think, on the surface. We'll see how it plays out, but I am excited to see him play.
Likewise, but that's it, Dana. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, and thank you very much for the listener for listening to us on the podcast providers or watching us on YouTube. And don't forget to press subscribe to either your podcast provider or our YouTube channel. We are trying to go really both and get more exposed to different Boro fans. But can Marcus use the Force to take Boro up to the promised land? I'm sure we'll see. But right now, this has been the Boro Breakdown podcast, and that was our Boro Match Day chatter in a pod. Up the Boro Breakdown.